Hi there, and welcome to the 60-second OctoPrint on Air. I'm your host, Gina Holzke. As always, there is no B in that name. You know that by now, I hope. And yeah, welcome to the very first episode of 2025, I guess. As always, we will be talking today about what I have been up to since the last one of these that I recorded in the mid of December, and what the next steps will be in the short term. And without further ado, I guess we just jump right into what I have been up to. And you might have noticed that the RC phase, or the release candidate phase for version 1.11.0 has started. And that is also what has kept me quite busy since the turn of the year. The first release candidate I pushed out on January 28th after a frantic month of release preparations. Which, by the way, is pretty much exactly a month ago. I'm recording this on February 27th. The second release candidate I pushed out on February 3rd, and the third release candidate on February 18th. And all in all, it has been pretty smooth sailing so far. Even though we saw 3 release candidates, that's a quite normal number, and I think I've never made it under 3 RCs because it usually also takes a while for things to be tested by the community, and some quirky bugs take a bit longer to figure out than others. Speaking about quirky bugs, pretty much everything is looking quite good, especially the new additions and the new functionality. But the reason for now being on RC3 was that we all in all had 3 regressions. 2 were found directly on the first release candidate and were fixed with the second one, which was that API keys were broken. Due to their login mechanism not having been set. I refactored a lot of stuff and got rid of some old code and duplicated code in the whole authentication mechanism. And API keys somehow, while I'm pretty sure I tested that, must have gotten broken during one of the final refactoring steps. And so that was fixed pretty quickly, actually. And another one which was a bit of a headache to actually fix was, you might remember that with from the release notes, or also because I mentioned it, that from 1.11.0 onwards, OctoPrint will have the templates of its own bundle plugins and its core UI auto-escaped, so that we no longer have that big of a target for cross-site scripting. But since I didn't want to break existing third-party plugins by forcing that on them as well immediately, there is now an opt-in time for that. So a third-party plugin can report that it supports auto-escaping, and then everything is fine. But the problem with RC1 was that if a plugin reported that it was not yet supporting auto-escaping, then the way that I disabled it for the plugins broke macros. And that was something that took a lot of time to figure out, and I know way more about Jinja template parsing than I ever wanted to know. But I fixed it. It now works again. Everything is fine. And that then got rolled out with the second release candidate. The third one was necessary because during testing of the second release candidate, someone noticed that the Remember Me cookie is broken. Not the Remember Me cookie, but actually it was the Remember Me cookie that was broken, but the Remember Me functionality that was what users noticed was broken. And that was a refactoring issue. There was some code in there that simply was not actual code that caused an exception immediately when trying to run, and that only got run when trying to decrypt the Remember Me cookie. So if you didn't use that, you would never notice. For example, I usually have auto login enabled on my own instances here, on my production instances, and on my development machine, I explicitly have Remember Me disabled, so I can test the login mechanism. And more easily log in with multiple user accounts with separate different permissions, so I can test stuff with that. And so I never noticed that. And yeah, but now that's fixed. And in the process of fixing that, I also added an end-to-end test of the Remember Me functionality. So in the future, that will be found on the first commit that I push into a repository that breaks it, basically. So that is really nice. And I always enjoy it when I find a way to automate testing something like that, rather than having to remember to regularly test it myself. Which reminds me, I probably should also add some kind of integration test for API keys working properly. But yeah, so that were the 3 regressions that we found. I also pushed some improvements for the newly added bundled plugins. Like the health check plugin got some small improvements, and there was also some problem, visual problem basically, with the custom control manager. And both of these were fixed as well, or rather improved. And so that will also be in 1.11. And that pretty much was most of the work of the past 2 months, minus vacation. But yeah, so as I said, all in all, the RC is looking good now. I hope that we won't need a 4th one. The only thing that could be better, in my humble opinion, is that we could use some more testers, because currently I'm looking at 672 unique instances, and let me share that quickly with you. So this is basically what has been happening here since January 1st. We saw first something like 122 instances participating in 1.11. Then we reached up to 223 with a concurrent at that time with the RC2, and then the RC3 is around 168-ish. Printing time has now reached over a year, which is good. Could also still be better, but 10,254 hours collective print time means that apparently that release is okay and working fine. That splits between the RCs like that, and you can see that obviously, since the most instances were seen so far with RC2, that's also what saw the most print time so far. And that is basically the current insight into the RC phase, and what I also use in order to figure out whether testing has been enough, or whether people actually are testing. So when I don't hear of any bugs, then I know, or I can hope that there aren't any, because if something is getting used actively and apparently successfully without any reports coming back, then this is a hint that it is working, I would say. Sorry. That would be that. What else have I been up to? So I said that most of the time was actually spent on the RC, but the past weeks, while I was waiting for test results to come in, I was actually also able to start working on what is going to be 1.12.0. And the first thing that I did for that, which is what felt extremely good, was that I updated the Python requirements to 3.9 plus, and threw out all of the workarounds and all of the deprecated dependencies and such that I had to still have in there for 3.7 to work. And that felt so good. You won't believe that. It also halved the build time. And so that is definitely a step in the right direction. And just as a reminder, OctoPrint 1.11 is the final version to support Python 3.7 and Python 3.8. Python 3.7 has been end of life since the end of 2023 now. And Python 3.8 has been end of life since October 2024. And it's not that I always need to run the latest and greatest, or that an end of life Python version stops being usable or something like that for easy things. But with OctoPrint, I also have to think about a whole ton of third-party dependencies that OctoPrint depends on, and also things like available Python versions on end-user systems. And the combination of all of that means that at some point, the maintenance overhead of having to still stay compatible to an end-of-life version of Python becomes ridiculous. Like, absolutely not something that you want me to use my time on. I think we all agree that it makes more sense for me to work on new functionality and on bug fixes rather than trying to keep OctoPrint working with a Python version that is pretty much dead. Yeah, that is the reason why we now have the health check plugin, which will tell you if you're running an end-of-life Python version and need to upgrade, which will also link you to an FAQ entry, which tells you your options on how best to upgrade. I also wrote a little tool, the VEnv tool, that will make this easier for you. Hopefully, at least. If you are not on OctoPy, at least that should help. If you are on OctoPy, the easiest way is to simply create a backup, flash a new version, and restore from backup, because that way you get everything else upgraded as well. And yeah, so that would be that. But apart from that, I also did some other things. So you might remember that in the last one, I mentioned that I was working on some fun refactorings, of which I hoped that it would allow for some new things in OctoPrint that currently aren't possible. And after working some more on that, and getting a good first implementation, I can tell you now that what I am working on there is that I finally got a good idea just before Christmas, basically, on how to get the COM layer, so the thing that OctoPrint uses to speak to your printer, modular in a way that will actually not require me to build it from the ground up. So so far I've actually been trying to do that since 2015, so 10 years now, and the approach that I so far had was a complete rewrite from the ground up, twice actually, because the first one didn't work because of firmware problems, and that the second one then worked, but that was something that I had to fully concentrate on for weeks at an end because of it being a full rewrite, and what also would have meant a ton of merging overhead when finally putting it back into the main development branch. And now I have a solution that allows me to just keep the old COM layer in there for serial communication, but wrap it in a way that is protocol agnostic and also transport layer agnostic. So whether that is serial and G-code or something else is something that OctoPrint will no longer care about. And abstracting all of the connection to the printer out into a well-defined interface without all of these details, and then allowing that to be swappable, basically, that interface. So yeah, as I said, I started on that during the final week, basically before Christmas, and I got it into a working shape where it could actually print within that week, which was like, whoa, awesome. Never done that fast. As I said, that's my third attempt. Now, in between working on the release candidate, I have also been able to add the final touches to it. So basically, if you're not connecting via serial, you might have some other connection parameters than port and baud rate. Or not you might, you will. And I needed a solution for that. So now there is some kind of the connection API, first of all, the REST API, which the UI uses for connecting to a printer, has been versioned so that from 1.12 upward, if a third-party client tries to use the old version with port and baud rate, that will still work, but the actual new official API supported for newer versions, and there is a version parameter that a client can provide. Can we please focus on me? Sorry for that. Great. I have no idea why that just decided to make me go out of focus, but yeah, where was I? Right. So the API has been versioned. The client can send an API version parameter. If it doesn't send one, the API will behave just like it did so far. But if it sends one and it is greater than 1.12.0, then the API will behave in a new way, which is to accept a connector parameter, which tells it which kind of connector to use to actually talk to your printer, and then the parameters for that connector to actually establish the connection to the printer. So far, we only have a serial connector, which takes port and baud rate as a parameter. But all of this has been done in a way that it can now be requested over the API. And I've also created a new template type that allows you to define this connection interface with the parameters that you require. So what is now possible, or rather what will be possible once I have been able to put some more, 1 or 2 more days into that, is creating a plugin which defines a new connector that already works, which also provides a template for this connector with the connection parameters to show in the connection UI. This also already works, and then switching between these and utilizing them to connect to the printer. And that is something where the switching works, but the parameter template is not correctly bound yet. But we are getting there. So that is going to be a lot of fun if it works, because that means that OctoPrint can then be adapted to other printer protocols, to other printer interfaces, to networked printers, to proprietary, maybe even to proprietary ones, if someone does the legwork to do that. And all of that not by having to implement pure G-code or having to try to translate into G-code or something like that, but by implementing a rather abstracted interface, like start a job, here's a job, something like that. I still have to do some minor stuff for the actual job management because it's too complicated to explain that now, but so there are still some things that I need to do. But overall, I think it is looking very good especially for the little work that so far had to go into it. And I think that will work. I think that will allow to finally achieve what I have been wanting to achieve for a decade. And I honestly, with every good idea that you get about something like that, I can't imagine why I didn't get that idea earlier. But yeah. I'm aiming for inclusion of that in OctoPrint 1.12.0. So as soon as I have the basics working so that the serial communication and all of that works fully with the new one and the templating works as well, I will throw that into the maintenance branch already. And then I will probably do some detail work for some additional functionality that I also want to expose over this this new connector. Oh God, sorry. I have an extremely dry throat right now from the talking here. Let's see if that helps. Basically, that is what that is my little side project basically that I started on during before Christmas to see if it would work, and that I can now report on that. Yes, the experiment was successful. It is going to work, and I am quite enthusiastic about having finally found a solution for that. That doesn't mean I have to put in a year of work to just refactor the COM layer, an interrupted year, which I will never get in my lifetime. It hasn't worked out the past 10 years to get that, because whenever I started serious work on the full refactoring, the full rewrite, something horrible happened. The funding crisis, the first one, where I went crowdfunded in the first place, family trouble, stuff like that. This one is rather moving fast and not breaking so many things in the progress, which works way better. Yeah. Okay, so that was that. I've also spent some time on some Custopizer cleanup. As a reminder, Custopizer is a little tool that I built, I think, in 2023, or maybe it was 2022. I'm not completely sure right now. to have an easy way in form of a small Docker container that also runs on GitHub Actions to customize something like a Raspberry Pi image by running a set of small, minimal shell scripts against it in order to update software, in order to install additional software, in order to fix things, stuff like that. And this is basically what powers the OctoPi up-to-date builds, which is what you get when you download OctoPi from the OctoPrint.org webpage or from the Raspberry Pi Imager. And those is the latest stable OctoPi image, but updated with the latest version of OctoPrint, with the latest kernel, the latest firmware, and also some minor fixes applied. And for that, I wrote Custopizer, but it is, of course, also something that you can use for other kinds of customizations. And that is actually what caused the recent activity on this project, because MeterU from Mainsail, which you might know from the Clipper side of things, is looking into using Custopizer for some stuff on their end. And so did some legwork, some cleanup here and there. And I took the opportunity of that to finally also give the whole Custopizer build chain some love, and also put some work into the CI that I used to build Custopizer and deploy Custopizer on the Docker repo and stuff, to ensure proper testing before pushing stuff. And also automated tagging of all the builds, so that, for example, you can also check out or build with the latest main branch instead of the latest release and such. So that's important for testing. And I also adjusted the GitHub action that comes with Custopizer, so that you can now also define which version to use, and you can also do some other stuff now that wasn't possible previously, and it also now builds better with images that aren't Raspberry Pi OS as well, thanks to MeterU. So that is looking good, and was something that also was well overdue, because frankly I had been using this tool, of course, myself, dogfooding it pretty much a lot, but now it's got some love and it's more flexible, and it is something that is hopefully going to help with a lot of image customization in the future. And then there was also the GitHub action cleanup that I had to do. So first of all, you hopefully also remember, or you might remember, that in the last one I said that was something that I would have to work on, because at the end of January there were some GitHub action deprecations coming up that I had to take care of before they broke my build. Well, it turns out something else broke my build right when I got back to work in January. Because the base image that you use, that the GitHub action stuff runs on, that you can define in your workflows, which is Ubuntu, latest for most of OctoPrint's builds, was updated to the latest Ubuntu LTS release that they wanted to use, which is 24.04. And it turns out that 24.04 didn't have Python 3.7 available anymore, and OctoPrint still needs to test against Python 3.7, so the build broke. So I frantically had to pin some stuff, and first of all I had to figure out what was wrong in the first place, and then I had to pin some build steps to Ubuntu 22.04 in order for those to still work, and then plaster to-do comments all over, so I would not forget to roll that back again when I could finally get rid of Python 3.7. That is also, by the way, something that I got rid of when I did the aforementioned upgrade to Python 3.9 on maintenance. Because working builds are something that are quite important, and they are even more so when you know that a release is imminent, and you want to make sure that your release candidates are actually passing the tests and such. So that was an unexpected work package that suddenly found its way on my doorstep. But yeah, thankfully it was done, and it was yet another thing that I was glad, or that made me glad that I could finally remove the Python 3.7 support from what is going to be 1.12, because stuff like this is just causing so much work and without much gain, actually, just because you are trying to support or continue to support an end of life version. Okay, so and those that I mentioned last time, those that were going to be deprecated at the end of January, I also had to take care of course, and that also cost more time than expected because, so I did a search through all of OctoPrint all of the OctoPrint organization and just replaced everything that I found that was outdated with the new stuff. No problems there. But then February came around and some of my integrations broke, and I was a bit sitting there like, but I replaced that and it's all fine. And then it actually turned out that some of the actions that I was depending on internally were using some of the deprecated stuff. So I had to go through everything with a fine-combed tooth, and that was failing, and dig out the versions that I needed to go to in order to make things work. And then sometimes they were not backwards compatible, and I needed to make more adjustments. So it was a whole lot of yak shaving, but in the end we had some yaks that were naked and everything worked again. Yeah. Okay, so that was all of the work of like 1.5 months. Because 1.5, because there was also some vacation in there, or 2 months instead of 2.5. Well, in any case, so around Christmas, I spent some wonderful time with my loved ones. Lots of gaming, lots of good food, board games as well. As usual, we started the new year over at my best friend and her husband and her dog, and played through an episode of Time Stories, which is a board game I really can recommend. And then later I also spent a wonderful week in the southern Black Forest with my partner. Lots of hiking. We even got some snow. It could have been more, but it was okay. Some beautiful sights, though. We climbed on top of some of the mountains there and looked at the other mountains and clouds underneath and such. So I took some great pictures. But the memories are even better than the pictures. So, And then the reason maybe that you are wondering about right now why this one is later than I anticipated, because originally I said that will be something like late January, maybe mid-February. Yeah, well, I don't know if I mentioned it on one of these so far, but I have a chronic vertigo that's been bothering me for the past 25 years now. And the past 3 or 4 weeks, that has been having some extra fun, which sadly is anything but fun for me. So I'm sitting here right now and everything is actually like I'm on a roller coaster, and I just got really good in ignoring it. But it is making things a bit difficult. But it is what it is, and I've gotten used to it. And I just wanted to let you know it was not that I had forgotten about this, but I just had to see that I got all of the above done, which of course had a higher prior, or the highest prior given the release candidate thing and stuff being broken and such, before I could take care of things like that. And then also, of course, accounting and such. Okay, so that was that. That was all the things that I've been up to. Now, what are the next steps? So, obviously, hopefully, the final release of 1.11.0. Currently still waiting for some more feedback on 1.11.0 RC3, but it looks like everything is fine. I mean, as you saw the stats, people are using that to print. I'm just not getting any bugs reported, so I guess it's probably all right. And I certainly also hope that I won't be needing a 4th RC, because every single release candidate usually adds something around 1 or 2 weeks of delay to the stable release, because, I mean, it doesn't suffice for me to push it out and then just after 3 days go, yep, it's stable, and release the stable release. That doesn't make much sense. So with every release candidate, I try to give people at least 1 weekend in between to test things, and ideally with the final ones a bit more. So currently I think we are on 2 weekends for the third one. And so if I now needed a fourth RC, which I then would have to push out something somewhat like next week or the week after that, that would then push the whole release 1 to 2 weeks later. So yeah, let's all hope that there won't be a need for a fourth RC. Right. And all in all, as much stress and as much work the release candidate phase usually is for me, and there right now is no exception to that. It's something that's needed to ensure stable release, and that is the target or the goal here, to make sure that everything that can be found will be found before it hits all of you, so that when the final release is getting pushed out, it's actually a good one. Yeah. And the other thing I'm of course going to focus on is finalizing the connector refactoring that I mentioned, so that this can be merged on maintenance and then worked on further for some more functionality, and maybe also some test implementation against some other printer interface. I'm just thinking, there's of course also the usual stuff that I need to take care of whenever something explodes somewhere. I also wanted to look into some additional tooling that might make my life easier when time permits, if time permits. So that is also something that I might look into next. But with that being said, I think we don't have anything more right now. I think it was quite a lot that I reported on already. So without further ado, the next one of these, I think something like late March or early April is most likely. And as usual, I will announce these I will push these first out on Patreon and on GitHub sponsors, and then a week later make them public for everyone, like this one. And that is pretty much it. Thank you for watching, as always. I hope it was interesting, even though it was a lot of technobabble this time. And all in all, stay healthy and happy printing. Bye.